Hello, my fellow thinkers and dreamers. You are listening to Mind Palace Musings, and I am your host, David Wellman. In the last episode, we wrapped up a mini-series on reality and if it actually is. And I don't think that's something we're going to have a question to until we die, and maybe we won't even get it then. So, today let's do a bit of a palate cleanser and talk about a universal human experience, one that's a bit taboo to talk about in Western society. We like to just pretend it is not going to happen to us, that it is something that happens to other people, that it is not a topic for polite society. We are, of course, talking about death. And so, without further ado, let us start with today's topic. Death is a universal birthright. So, before we get started, let us just make a few assumptions. One being that death is something all humans do. There is an argument, and it is a fun one to make, that there is a non-zero chance that you, the listener, or me, the speaker, that we are immortal, because after all, we haven't died yet, so again, non-zero chance that we are immortal. But for the purpose of this episode, we'll die. And death isn't necessarily the end, but it is the end of the physical body. It is a process that we all have to go through, whether we are mortal or not, or whether this is just our one brief ride on the merry-go-round. So, death. All humans die. This is the contract we sign at birth. And every human that has ever lived has died or is yet to die. It being such a ubiquitous thing, you would think it is a more readily accepted topic, but it's not. It's something we shy away from, at least in the Western world. It's not something you're meant to bring up at the dinner table, for example. And I find that quite bizarre. Now, many people have gone into the history of death, and the history of death is such a stupid thing to say, but it makes sense. The history of humanity and our relationship with death, and I will go into it in a minor detail later in the episode. But for now, let me get into my own relationship with death. I was uniquely acquainted with death from a very young age, so I had to grapple with it quite early, younger than most people have. When I was 7 years old, I lost my mother, and that's not something many 7-year-olds have to deal with. Sure, many have been born and grow up knowing that they had grandparents, but that they died before they were born, and that's just kind of a thing that happened. But I had to sit and grapple with the fact that, the woman that gave birth to me had been killed, that really got to me, and I think actually drove me to my early atheism, which, as an atheist, I was terrified of death because that was the end of existence. For an atheist to die, there is no more living. There's no second chances. There's no higher form of being. There's no alternate planes. There's just the void. Now, my feelings have since changed as I get older and dip more into my own spirituality. I don't have the answers for what will happen after I die, but I'm not afraid of death. The promise of death actually excites me a bit. It's a potentially new, exciting phase of my life, whatever that may be. Or it could just be the void. Either way, I get to rest. Get to give up on this human bullshit. That's not to say that I want my death to come any sooner than it is meant to, because otherwise my life would have been a waste. Just obviously I should enjoy it while I have it. And yeah, that being said, whenever it happens is when it was meant to happen, and that just depends on how the universe has been set up this time around. But this episode is not about me. It's about humanity and their relationship with death. Well, partly. It's also partly about me. It's my podcast. Fuck you. Sorry. Anyway. So humans likely started religion and spirituality to cope with death. They'd see the moisture of the breath and be like, hey, this is the spirit. And then obviously when someone dies, the spirit no longer comes out of their breath, out of their mouth. It has left their body. Don't quote me on this. I saw it in a documentary when I was a kid. So if any of this is wrong, then Discovery Channel lied to me. So as mentioned earlier, death is a great taboo in the Western society. We act like if we ignore it, it won't happen. We dare not discuss it with children, instead telling them that their pets and grandparents have gone to live happily on a farm. We shelter them from the We shelter them from the harsh truth of the world. A truth that is only harsh because of our own fear and inadequacies. We hide it from the children, not because we're worried that it will, hurt them. We're worried it's going to hurt us. Kids are a lot more, I don't know what to say, neuroplastic. they accept a lot more than we give them credit for. If you tell a kid about death, he's just going to be like, okay, cool, can I go play now? Whereas tell an obese man in his 40s who last did a push-up 10 years ago about, death is coming, and he's going to start sweating and his face is going to go red and his heart's going to start beating, and you might actually kill him there on the spot. Now, I haven't done too much research into this. I'm sure there's far better sources on like a good in-depth discussion of the history of humanity's relationship with death. One good episode I enjoyed of Midnight Gospel was on death, and I think it's worth a watch. They kind of discussed about death in the West and how it's been commodified, just as we've managed to commodify everything else. Gotta love it. I'm being sarcastic. So everyone has seen these classic Western funerals in movies. They're very dour affairs. Everyone's sad for themselves because they know their time is coming. There's rain and everyone's wearing black, and the son who's now inherited his father's life's fortune hugs his mother and cries, and the old partner watches off from the... You guys have seen the movies. I don't think it should be this way. Funerals should be a celebration of the life the person lived, not to mourn the life that they lost. Some cultures do handle it this way, and others handle it differently. Buddhist cultures do not necessarily worry too much about funerals, since they fundamentally believe in death as part of the cycle of life, although mourning is a more structured process. Pre-modern Mongolians would hold sky funerals and just put the bodies up high somewhere to be eaten by birds in the wind. It was an empty shell that they no longer needed. It's pretty fucking metal, really cool. But it's also very practical, like cremation. You don't have to dig holes, and especially for a nomadic society, that just makes sense. Just leave the body somewhere. They're gonna be born into a new one soon. It doesn't matter. Christians have an interesting way of looking at it. So, ignoring the whole afterlife heaven thing, certain sects of Christianity, like the ones my grandparents were a part of, which is very close to actually just being a cult. Then again, Christianity in general... No, I'm kidding. Anyway, they are typically against cremation and would like to be buried. This is so that there is a body in the ground that can be raptured when the time comes. I honestly think this is a big waste of space and resources. But in a weird way, we also have Christianity to thank for the formation of the modern world. So, yeah, pluses and minuses. We needed religion before society had formed enough to keep people in line. Nowadays we have laws. There are penalties to being bad. Whereas in the past, you needed that fear of God to keep people in line. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that our fear of death likely indirectly led to the formation of modern society as religion formed and took control of the masses. As we huddled together in our existential dread of the unknown, of what happens beyond life, we ended up forming everything we know today. Now, some days I do wake up and think, I wish we were still living in the woods, picking berries and hunting things. This brain is not meant to look at spreadsheets and emails. But then other days I'm like, yeah, okay, this is pretty cool. I can deal with this. But in this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. I think Shakespeare wrote that. I say I think because I obviously copied this from somewhere and would have known back when I copied it who wrote it, but I didn't actually put in my notes who wrote it, and I'm too lazy to go and look it up now, but I think it was Shakespeare. So, speaking of death and taxes, there are ways to get around your taxes, but we haven't figured out death yet. Evading your taxes will get you in trouble with the law if you're caught, and perhaps evading death will hold some similar fate. Taxes are a human law, and death is a universal one. So, what would the universal equivalent of a tax office be? Perhaps we are already serving out a sentence through reincarnation or just human life in general. And I'd like to explore all of this in a separate episode about immortality. Spoiler alert for future episodes. So, our obsession with avoiding death seems to come directly by subverting nature. Since the start of recorded history, humans have searched for ways to avoid death, searching for the philosopher's stones and elixirs and potions and animal parts and ancestor wood, anything, absolutely anything to expand the lifespan, and we've looked into doing it. Since civilization started, human lifespans have gone way up, especially in the past 100 years with the advent of modern medicine. We even now have the elite vampires of the 1% quite literally stealing blood and marrow from the young to just get that brief hope of a few more days to their lifespan. I mean, they're literally fucking vampires. Anyway, from a biological standpoint, we should be living in small hunter-gatherer societies. This is what our body and instincts have evolved up to. Society and civilization have progressed way faster than our bodies can actually evolve to adapt to it. So, as we try to subvert nature, it fights back. Plagues are a result of our domestication of animals and living so closely together in industrialized society. We've created super bacteria and viruses due to our need to sanitize everything and the heavy use of antibiotics in our food sources and ourselves. As we build up society, the planet becomes more hostile towards us. We are busy melting the ice caps and raising global temperatures and killing off biodiversity. The good news is that life will go on even if humans eradicate themselves. The planet's gone through way worse than humans. People are always like, oh, we're wrecking the planet. And we absolutely are. But people are worried that the planet won't bounce back. It's been hit by motherfucking asteroids. Ash clouds blanketing it for years and years and years, killing almost everything on Earth. I mean, life on this planet started as single-celled organisms that needed to find a way to use all the carbon dioxide, and we got plants. The planet's going to be fine. Humans, on the other hand, we'll see how the next 50 years go. And this is all what we are doing to ourselves. In a weird way, it's almost like we are... But by fighting nature, we are also fighting ourselves. Our attempts at fighting against what is natural, the natural law of the world, just means that we are bringing ourselves closer to our end. As we increase the individual lifespan, we decrease the lifespan of our species. And I think that just perfectly encapsulates this modern culture of consumption, of, you know, having things now and not caring about the future. And it's a shame. Mental illness in our old age is also a horrible price to pay for a body that was not meant to last that long. If I can compare it a bit to programming, we have this concept called a memory leak, which, even as a non-programmer, it's maybe something you've heard of. Essentially, a bad programmer might write a program in such a way that they aren't handling their resources well. So you end up with what's called a memory leak, where as the program runs, it just creates more and more garbage data that can't be used by anything. And eventually you can crash your computer like this because you just fill up all the RAM, or you have to kill the program. Now, this could be a bit like our brains, you know, built to last X amount of years, and we keep pushing past that. And so, you know, it's like the first rockets that we sent up into space. We didn't design them to be these super robust, amazing things that could come back. They were fire and forget solutions. They only needed to work once. It's only now that we want to keep going to space that we find ways to reuse our rockets. It could be the same with our brains. They were, I say designed, I don't actually mean they were designed. That's the role that they suited, you know, evolution and all that. They weren't meant to last this long, you know? So now we have to study animals that either can regenerate or were meant to last that long, and find ways to apply it to ourselves. Yeah, you know, living's cool, but when you see how scary it is, maybe death is the better alternative. Now, one side will win this battle, us versus nature. Maybe there can be a stalemate in the future, a ceasefire, but if not, which side wins will still to be seen, and I don't have my money on the humans. We cannot conclude a discussion about death without bringing entropy into the mix. So, what is entropy? Well, entropy is defined as a thermodynamic quantity representing the unavailability of a system's thermal energy for conversion into mechanical work, often interpreted as the degree of disorder or randomness in the system. Or, to put it in English, lack of order or predictability, gradual decline into disorder. Basically, the universe hates us. Why do I say that? Well, as time marches on, the universe slowly decays away. Even if we can beat death, soon there will be no energy left in the universe to sustain us. Death is inevitable, even if we can beat it on the biological scale. This extends to the natural world as well. Everything ages, everything decays. The mighty mountain eventually crumbles to wind and streams. Mighty animals lose their teeth. The answer to this is procreation. Every living being procreates. Every living being exploits something else to keep going. Plants exploit the sun. Herbivores exploit the plants. Carnivores exploit the herbivores. Life continues only because of entropy. Because without entropy, there would be nothing. If there were no suns burning, shooting out UV energy, no plants would be able to photosynthesize. Without plants, you don't have life. Life and death are one and the same, both required to keep the cycle going. And in the same way, if we were immortal, we'd never get anything done. We'd always have later. It would be a society full of procrastination. Why ever do anything if you can just do it in a year or 10 years or 100 years? It wouldn't matter. This is why I don't think immortality is a desirable endgame. But that's going in its own episode, I promise. Soon, one day. So, let's talk about some implications of this, and I'll keep them light because the subject matter of this episode is something very heavy for some people, and I don't blame them for that. We all die, so it's time to live. Enjoy your life while you have it. You might get another, but you might not. We should be less stuffy about death and the discussion of it, because we sign our death warrants the day we're born. It's not something we can avoid, so why should we ignore it? And it's due to the impending end of everything that we are driven to make and create and do. One cannot live without death looming on the horizon. We need both of them. We can't live without death, and we can't die without life. My fellow thinkers and dreamers, my dear seekers of truth and knowledge, thank you for joining me once again. I'm trying not to instill all these existential crises. It's unavoidable, I'm sorry. Maybe one day we'll talk about something light and fluffy, but today was not that day, and I doubt tomorrow is going to be that day either. But that's life, you know, you gotta ask the difficult questions if you want substantial answers. But in any case, we can save that for the next episode. Thank you for watching. Well, you didn't watch, you listened. Unless you're on YouTube, then you could have watched, but you would just be watching a blank image. Doesn't matter. There are details in the description. Please come and join the discussion on Reddit at r/mindpalacemusings. You can follow the Twitter for updates. That's at mpm_podcast. What else do we have? We have things. If you are enjoying the series, please would you give it a like, give it a comment, share it with your pets and your teachers and your grandparents and the guy who repairs your Samsung smart fridge. I don't know what platform you're on, but I'm sure it has one of these settings, I'm sure. If you'd like to see some of my art that I do alongside the podcast, it's like kind of surreal, psychedelic, psychonaut kind of art, you can follow me on Instagram at David_Wellman. But until next time, this has been Mind Palace Musings. I have been your host, David Wellman, and please do stay curious.